Hi everyone. In this short video, I'm going to talk you through a process we're going to be using to design lesson plans for your blended student teaching. Now, the process I'm going to talk you through in this short video is only going to apply to the content area that you are blending this semester. For your other content areas, your non-blended content areas, you're going to use the TaskStream lesson plan template. But for your blended content area, I'm going to ask you to create what are called playlists. And I'm going to walk you through the process of doing that. If you'll think about lesson planning for just a moment, the way we go about planning for whole group instruction and the way we go about planning for blended instruction are very different. So I'm going to share with you a process and some tips and tools for how to make the most of this process. We're going to create playlists for blended learning. So a playlist is a personalized sequence of instruction for an individual student. These personalized sequences or playlists are sequences that students would work through over the course of several days. Ideally, each student in your blended classroom would have their own playlist that they may be working on for a week or two, and that playlist would include lots of different types of content that are presented in different ways. The playlist would include some interactive activities, which would give students opportunities to explore the content, to practice with the content, to apply the content. And the playlist would also include a pre-assessment, for example, so students can find out before they begin the playlist what they already know and need to know, as well as frequent opportunities for assessment embedded throughout the playlist. So students might explore some content, complete an activity, and then do an assessment. The assessment would give students feedback on how they're progressing and also provide the teacher with real-time data about student progress toward their specific learning outcomes. The playlist is a great tool or structure for allowing students to have some element of control over time, place, path, and or pace, which, as you know, is the definition of blended learning. So a playlist is a great way to do that. Using playlists, again, like I said, gives students some control over time, place, path, or pace. It can give you, the teacher, immediate feedback on how students are progressing toward learning outcomes, as well as give students feedback for tracking their own progress. It gives you, the teacher, the opportunity to respond immediately to student needs, and it can also free you up to give you more time to target student needs through small group instruction and one-on-one instruction. So while students are working through their personalized playlists, you can use that time to work with small groups or work one-on-one with student needs. And a lot of the information you can use to plan for that small group instruction or that one-on-one instruction can come from the data you gather from students' work on the playlist. So let's talk about what it looks like to create playlists and actually implement those in a blended setting. So in a playlist, you have a few different options for the types of content you might want to include. You may want a playlist that will introduce students to a new concept or skill. So you may have an entire playlist that's designed to give students an introduction to a new concept or a new skill. Or you may design a playlist that's designed to help students review something that you maybe have introduced whole group, or you've maybe introduced through small group, or you've introduced in some way, and now you want students to have some time to dig deeper and to review some of that content. Or you could design a playlist that's really centered on assessing something that you've been working on for a long period of time. Maybe you've just completed a big unit of instruction, and you want to give students an individualized playlist where you can, it can really just be filled with assessments for you to find out what they know and can do. When you're choosing content and types of content, consider what you know about your students. Think about their interests, think about what engages specific students, and use the data you've been gathering through assessments and through their work on playlists to determine what content and what types of content each student needs for their playlist. There's some different ways to think about structuring a playlist. So sort of think of like a music playlist, where you have a list of songs. Instead, you could use a list for this playlist, but you have some other structure options as well. One of those would be like a choice board type of structure, where students have a grid and they have several options and they can kind of pick and choose and work at their own pace. It might be a list. Your playlist might be a slide deck. I actually have some examples of those later in this presentation. So you may have a Google slide deck that students would go through, and the slide deck would include the content, it would include activities, it would include assessments, it would include links to other resources, all within a slideshow. It could look like an agenda, sort of like an itinerary, But again, students need some sort of choice in how they progress through that. Or it could be a module. So for those of you who are using Canvas, you could design a module as a playlist. So there are lots of tools that can help you, really any kind of tool that would allow you to add lots of different types of content and to give students some choice in how they progress through the content and activities. Also, you want to consider a tool that has some assessment opportunities for you. So again, a Canvas module would work. A Google Doc, so you could have one Google document that has all of the content and links and assessments embedded, or you could have a Google Slides, like I mentioned earlier, that would take students through various pieces of content and activities and assessments. There are some tools you're already familiar with, like Blendspace and Nearpod, that work really well for this. Blendspace especially works well for giving students choice, because they don't have to move through it in a linear way. So students can pick and choose different pieces of the Blendspace that you design. Nearpod works well though too. Students, especially if you use the homework feature of Nearpod, students can control their own pace with a Nearpod lesson. There's also a great tool, Lesson Paths, that's linked here, and then there's a Symbaloo lesson planning tool that works really well. The Symbaloo lesson planning tool lets you create customized pathways for students. Here's what it might look like in a Canvas module. So you might have it organized into things they need to read, things they need to watch, things they need to do. You might have assessments embedded throughout the module. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about how to design and implement playlists. So some tips to help you get started with playlists for your blended classroom. The first tip is to include a pre-assessment at the start of your playlist so that students can find out what they already know and can do, and that can help them choose appropriate content and activities. So don't assume that your students are going to be able to make the best choices about what to engage with in the playlist. They're going to need some guidance with that, and a pre-assessment can be a really helpful tool for that. Keep in mind that you need to embed some assessment opportunities throughout the playlist so that students can self-assess and so that they can send feedback to you, the teacher. So you can be anywhere in the room working with a small group or working one-on-one, and if you have your device, you can get immediate feedback from students through their assessments. Before you start using playlists in your classroom, you're going to need to teach some specific mini lessons about procedures for using playlists. So teach a specific lesson about how to read a playlist, project a playlist up on the screen, and talk about how to read it, how to use the headings or how to use the symbols, how to navigate it. Talk about the ways to choose the best content and activities. Talk about how to manage your time. Talk about what to happen if, what to do if something specific happens during playlist time. Talk about how not to interrupt you if you're working with a small group or one-on-one. All those procedural mini lessons can help you and your students make the most of that playlist time. When you're designing a playlist, use some symbols or icons to help students navigate the playlist and help them identify things that are like must-dos, so things that they absolutely have to engage with, and things that are options, as well as to help them identify what is content to explore, which are activities they need to complete, and which are assessments they need to complete. So just creating and using consistent icons or symbols can be a huge help in managing the playlist process and helping students manage that time well. Be sure to include a variety of types of content and activities to engage diverse types of learners. And make sure that you preview all content in advance. So if you're including a video or an interactive game or some sort of website, be sure that you've thoroughly examined that before including it in a playlist. Now here I have some links to sample playlists. This is what the Symbaloo lesson planning tool looks like. But I'm going to show you a couple of examples that were created in Google Slides. So this will show you how easy it is to create a playlist. This playlist was set up in Google Drive as a Google slide, and there are icons. So as I mentioned earlier, it can be helpful to have icons or symbols so students know what to do on each slide. You can tell students what is the goal, what are the outcomes for them in this, and give them specific instructions. And then you can see as you scroll through the slides here, there are content slides, there are interactive resources, so videos, interactive websites for them to practice with the content, more videos, there's a song, and there are going to be assessment opportunities embedded here as well. So there's an exit ticket at the end. So that's how easy it can be to build a playlist just by creating something simple like a Google slideshow. Here's another example for reading. but it's built very similarly with those with similar kinds of symbols and a similar structure. Again, students control the pace here, so it's not going to take them through necessarily in a linear way. Students don't have to go through one slide at a time. They can make some choice about how they progress. And again, they have different types of content. So here's a cartoon video. They have images and text. They're going to have opportunities to do interactive activities and assessments, all embedded within a playlist. Also, just keep in mind a playlist should not be something that students complete every day. So you don't need a playlist for every student every day. Again, it's something that they would work through over the period of several days. There's a 7th grade example here that uses the new Symbaloo lesson planning feature. I can show you really quickly what that looks like. It works similar to Nearpod or BlendSpace. The student's pathway is sort of laid out here, and students would click Start. It would show them here are the objectives they need to learn, or they're going to learn in this lesson, and then it takes them through each resource that was in that pathway. Sometimes it's going to be websites, sometimes it might be a content page, it might be a video, sometimes they are quiz questions. You can create it to design whatever content and activities and assessments you need. So that's the Symbaloo lesson planning tool. There's an example there right here for science. So when you're using playlists in your blended student teaching, and in the future if you're in a blended setting, one great starting place is starting by designing a playlist for each small group of students. And that's actually what I'm going to expect of you in your blended student teaching. So when you submit your plans to me, I'm going to ask for a playlist for each group of students. So all of you are blending a part of your day that's already set up as in a small group format. So in that small group format, I'm looking for a playlist for each small group. The goal would be eventually for you as a teacher to design a playlist for each student. So you might start with a group playlist for this group of 5 students, but then make some tweaks to that for each, so that each student has one that's more closely tailored to that specific student. I'm not going to ask you to get to that place for your student teaching, but do know that that's sort of the goal of blended learning and personalized learning. That's sort of where you would want to get eventually, is get to the point where you have a playlist for each student. But for the blended student teaching experience, I'm going to ask for a playlist for each small group. Students will be using those playlists during the station time or the center time that you already have set up during the day, and then you'll be working with students in small groups or one-on-one while students work through those playlists. So what I want you to submit to me each week, once you pick up your blended content area, is I want you to turn into me your playlist, again, one per group. In the playlist, be sure to tell me what me and your students, what your content standards or outcomes are. So for this specific playlist, for a specific group, what are the things that they need to know and be able to do as they work through this playlist? Also, submit to me a plan for what you're going to be doing while students work on playlists. So what are you going to be doing with small groups or one-on-one? What are the concepts? How are you going to be teaching those? So you're going to be turning in sort of more traditional plans for that time, so what you're going to be doing during the playlist time, but I also want to see those playlists. Now over the next couple of weeks, as you prepare to start taking over that blended content area and you start to build your first playlist for those small groups, please reach out to me and let me know how I can help you with that. I'd be happy to come sit with you during your planning time one day and help you design a playlist. I'd love to help you think through what tool might work best for your students, what sort of structure or symbols might work best for your playlist. Also, you guys should share ideas with each other, especially those of you who have grade levels that are sort of close. You may be able to give each other some ideas about what tools you're going to use and what structures, how you're going to introduce playlists and that sort of thing. So I would expect to see the first week of your blended content area, I would expect to see you teaching some mini lessons about how to use playlists, how to navigate them, and how to manage the playlist time. So that may be something that you need to plan for in your first few days of using playlists. But again, what I want to see from you is one playlist per student group, as well as your plans for what you're going to do with that time when you're working with small groups and individual students. If you have any questions about this, about the playlist idea, or about how to get started, please get in touch with me and let me know what you need so that I can come and be a support for you.